Hey guys, tonight we descend into the strange, squishy underworld of ancient Rome. Not the Colosseums or grand libraries, but the faded, foam, slicked basins of the Roman laundromat. Picture yourself tiptoeing down a crowded alley, dodging a donkey cart, and pausing beside a sun-baked amphora labeled for urine. Yes, pee. That's your first hint you're somewhere special. You've wandered into a Phallonica, one of the many public laundry shops in Rome where dirty tunics went in, and somehow came out whiter than a senator's smile. The air smells like ammonia and crushed chalk. You probably won't survive this if you're squeamish about feet, fluids, or mysterious bubbling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals scrape on mosaic as you enter. Inside the Phallonica, several workers, called fullones, are ankled deep in shallow vats of fluid. They stomp rhythmically, arms crossed for balance, looking more like wine pressers than clothes cleaners. Except instead of grapes, they're marinating tunics in a heady brew of human urine and volcanic clay. It's the ancient Roman recipe for clean. That smell, a cocktail of warm ammonia and sweat. The Romans, masters of efficiency, didn't waste what was naturally expelled. Public urinals, called Phallonica amphorae, lined the streets, encouraging passersby to donate. Urine, rich in ammonia, was a prized cleaning agent, softening cloth fibers and breaking down grease like a primitive dry cleaner. It's weird, but it worked. Sort of. You watch as a fullone drags out a sopping tunic, the off-white fabric now tinged yellow from the chemical stew. He slaps it against a washboard, scrubs with a gritty paste of fuller's earth, and rinses it in surprisingly clear water from a nearby aqueduct tap. Your inner germaphobe cringes. But Romans weren't quite thinking in bacteria. They were thinking in whiteness and prestige. Historians still argue whether this practice was widely accepted or quietly reviled. Some say wealthy Romans proudly sent their garments to the Phallonica. Others whisper that they just didn't want to do the stomping themselves. Either way, fullers became essential to Rome's linen cycle, even if their workplaces reeked like a tavern's back corner on festival day. The shop buzzes with routine. A boy carries armfuls of damp fabric to a tiled bench, where an older woman folds them into neat stacks. You catch her muttering under her breath, something about that blasted tax. A subtle foreshadowing, if you're paying attention, you pass a stone basin labeled rinse. The water's cold, tinged blue by leftover woad dye. As another worker dips the tunic in, you see the fabric brighten. Romans didn't have soap in the modern sense. They relied on earth, urine, and muscle power. It wasn't glamorous, but it meant jobs, and it meant clean-ish togas. Then, tucked in a corner, you spot a mural. Faded but charming, it shows a fullone dancing with a sponge. Above it, a Latin inscription, Fortuna Lavandis. Good fortune in washing. It's graffiti, not official decoration, and it gives you a peek into the humor of these workers. They knew their job stank. They joked about it anyway. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Roman laundry sometimes used sulfur fumes to bleach cloth. Picture a room of damp linens hung over hot coals, with workers fanning plumes of noxious smoke. Better hope no one passed out, or worse, burst into flames. It was rare, but there are stories. Back outside, the amphora jars slosh gently in the breeze, reminding you this is all part of the city's plumbing of labor. This system depended not just on those who wore the tunics, but on those who stomped, scrubbed, and scalded them into submission. The silent machinery of empire wasn't gears and chains, it was sandals in peapots. You stepped carefully past the splash zone, wondering just how long this had been going on. Turns out, fullones had been around since the early Republic, with their prominence peaking in the 1st century CE. Their role, both mundane and weirdly respected. Enough so that some were buried with statues holding sponges. An odd legacy, but hey, when you clean for emperors, you leave your mark. Oh, and if you're wondering about safety, not much of it. No gloves. No ventilation. Just years of ammonia exposure, foot infections, and probably some broken toenails from kicking basalt walls. But for many, it was better than starving. A bell rings, quitting time. The fullones drain the vats, mop up puddles, and lock away their clay. You watch them shuffle home, shoulders slumped, but tunics crisp. They don't talk much. Not yet. Not until years later, when that quiet grumbling will bubble into something stranger. For now, the rebellion sleeps under their soggy feet. The next morning, you return to the Falonica. The streets are already humming, vendors yelling, sandals slapping, and in the air, that faint, familiar tang of last night's wine and public convenience. But here in the laundry shop, there's a different rhythm. You step inside just as the first shift begins. The fullones are back at it, rolling up sleeves, hauling urns, and slipping off sandals to start their morning stomping session. This is more than just a workplace. It's a fullones guild site, and you're about to learn how organized the soapless sud society really is. Unlike some casual modern jobs, Roman fullones work hard, carrying professionals. The Collegium Fullonum, or Fuller's Guild, operated like a hybrid of a union, religious brotherhood, and homeowner association, with all the fun rules and peer pressure that implies. You were expected to follow certain rituals, show up for processions, and definitely not undercut your peers by undercharging for toga restoration. You notice a painted sign on the wall, a red crescent moon above two crossed paddles, emblem of the local guild. Historians still argue whether such symbols were merely decorative or encoded with hidden meanings. Some believe they referenced ancient cleaning rites linked to lunar cycles. Others say it's just branding. Either way, it's very official looking, even if it smells like hot socks in here. Today is Dues Day. One fullon sidesteps from the vat and produces a clay token, his membership chip. He hands it to an older man at a side table, who nods and tucks it into a ledger box. No token. No vat. It's harsh, but the guild needs funds to buy Fuller's Earth, maintain the basins, and throw the occasional Saturnalia banquet. Now, here's something quirky. The guilds often held feasts where they reenacted mythological scenes with laundry puns. There's a known example of a man dressed as Hercules using a paddle to slay a pile of moldy tunics, while another worker played Medusa with tangled laundry ropes. They called it comedic purification. Despite the stench and the foot fungus, there's a real sense of pride here. These fullones see themselves as integral to Roman society. After all, what senator wants to give a speech in a crusty, pit-stained toga? Fashion mattered in Rome. Public image was everything, and these folks controlled the final filter. One fullone, Gaius, grizzled, no nonsense, explains as he scrubs a stain with chalk paste. You want clean, you need us. And we know it. He doesn't smile. Probably hasn't in a while. But you sense a quiet confidence. These aren't unskilled laborers. They're artisans of the amphora, barons of bleach. Even more surprising, some fullones climb the social ladder. There are documented cases of launderers becoming wealthy enough to own multiple Falonica and even donate public buildings. One man, Marcus Vesonius Primus, paid for an entire civic fountain. And guess what? He included a statue of himself holding a laundry paddle. Subtle. You step into the drying courtyard, where linens hang between columns like wind-blown ghosts. A young girl tends to the ropes, moving tunics around to catch more sun. She hums a soft tune off, key but sweet. Her job, vital. Too much moisture and mold creeps in, and no one wants moldy pleats. Not far from her, two fullones argue. You can't catch every word, but it's about clay quality and favoritism. One gestures toward a storage jar, yelling something about the good stuff being hoarded, a whisper of tension. You make a mental note. Guilds, for all their structure, weren't always harmonious. Power concentrated in the hands of a few, those who controlled the best ingredients, the wealthiest clients, or the knowledge of specialized bleach mixtures. It's easy to imagine factions forming: the old school stompers, Vest the Rising Sponge, scrubbers. And here's a little known tidbit: some guilds even had secret handshakes or password chants. Roman historians rarely documented them, possibly because they weren't taken seriously. But there are graffiti fragments with cryptic laundry phrases that hint at internal codes. Imagine needing a password just to rinse out a tunic. The day grinds on. You notice patterns. Certain togas go through extra rinses. Others get polished with a shell, brush for extra shine. The rich get richer, even in dirt removal. And yet, there's camaraderie here. Someone starts a work song. Half chant, half complaint, and others join in, stomping to the beat. It's absurd but oddly charming. Still, the undercurrent lingers. You see sidelong glances, muttered exchanges over chalk jars. Someone slipped an extra coin into the dues box. Another dodged it. The guild has rules, but not everyone plays fair. And as the vats bubble and the linens flap, you realize this system's as much about power as it is about pee. Even in ancient Rome, your dry cleaner might be part of something bigger, something murkier. And while the guild might host banquets and build fountains, it also has a dark side: exclusion, secrets, quiet resentment. You begin to understand why, years from now, this seemingly dull profession will stir into quiet rebellion. For now, the Fallones scrub on, paddling and stomping beneath the painted sign of their guild. The sun begins to lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard. You step back into the alley, half blinded by sunlight and half gagged by fumes. But you're starting to see the Follonica differently. It's not just a workplace. It's a web. And sooner or later, someone's gonna tug the wrong thread. Today, you arrive even earlier. The alley outside the Follonica is still quiet, just the low murmur of pigeons and the clink of a broom against stone. Inside, the vats are already filling. Steam curls into the air, catching the morning light in a way that almost makes the place look magical. Almost. You slip off your imaginary sandals. Don't want to ruin the mental image, and dip your foot into one of the shallow basins. It's warm, too warm, and slippery. The bottom is slick with silt and something that smells faintly like pickled feet. Welcome to a typical day at the Roman laundry. You wade in beside two Fallones, who barely glance at you before returning to their work. You're here to stomp. Not gently, either. This is a full body rhythm exercise, equal parts cardio and exfoliation. You bend your knees slightly and start pressing your feet down into the fabric, shifting your weight back and forth like a drunken flamingo. The tunics beneath your toes are soaked in a mixture of water, powdered fuller's earth, and, you guessed it, urine. Fresh, human urine, possibly collected just this morning from a jar outside a tavern. Isn't history glamorous? The Romans didn't just accept this method, they optimized it. There were entire delivery systems for collecting public urine, including specially marked jars placed at corners and bathhouse exits. Some slaves were even tasked with fetching and hauling this yellow gold to the Follonica. It's efficient, if deeply unsettling. Historians still argue whether workers rotated jobs or specialized in one part of the process. Today, you're doing it all because nothing says cultural immersion like stepping on someone's undergarments in a vat of hot ammonia. The stompers, Fallones like you now, congratulations, don't talk much. The work's too physical. Instead, they communicate with grunts, eye rolls, and the occasional slap of a paddle on water. The rhythm is hypnotic: squish, squish, shift, lift, squish. It's like an ancient Zumba class, but with more blister risk. Eventually, the tunics are pulled out and moved to another basin. This one is for rinsing. Cooler water, cleaner too, drawn from the aqueduct system and stored in sun-warmed cisterns. You wring out each garment by hand, twisting the fabric until your knuckles ache. If you're lucky, you avoid a splash of backwash. One worker, a wary teenager named Livia, shows you how to lay the damp cloth across a ridged tile slab. She grabs a pumice stone, adds a scoop of chalk paste, and starts scrubbing like her life depends on it. You mimic her technique, and soon your arms are burning. You lean in and ask her why they don't just use soap. She snorts. Soap is for barbarians, she says. We use science. Then she pats the jar of Fuller's Earth like it's a family pet. Fun fact, while soap did exist in the Roman world, mostly imported from the fringes of the empire, it wasn't widely used for clothes. Fuller's Earth, a naturally absorbent clay, was preferred. It sucked out oils and grit, and when paired with pee, it became surprisingly effective. Now for the quirky bit, some shops added exotic ingredients to their laundry brew. Think goat bile, crushed shells, or even powdered horn. One recipe recommended saffron, not for cleaning, but to add a hint of yellow tint to white garments, signaling wealth. Fancy. Midday arrives, and you're drenched, not from water, but from your own sweat. The Follonica has no roof over the main floor, so the sun bears down, cooking the vats and tanning your forearms at the same time. You take a break in the shade of a crumbling arch, watching a supervisor inspect the laundry. This guy's wearing a toga with suspiciously pristine folds. He sniffs each tunic, scowls at one, and flings it back into the wash pile. Livia whispers, he's related to a senator. Never scrubbed a thing in his life. You nod. Every workplace has that guy. By the afternoon, your legs feel like boiled olives. You shift to another task, beating dry garments with a wooden paddle. This fluffs the fibers and polishes the fabric. It's also oddly satisfying, like whacking a rug or popping bubble wrap. Therapeutic until your wrist starts seizing. Toward the end of the day, a messenger arrives. He's out of breath, holding a scroll. The supervisor reads it, frowns, and crumples it with a grunt. New tax measures, someone mutters. Vespasian again, another replies. You store that detail in your mental laundry basket. A storm's brewing, fiscal and otherwise. As the last garments are folded, you stagger over to a bench and watch the workers pour leftover water into the street gutter. The liquid hisses on the hot stones, carrying its secrets into the Tiber. Here's a debate for you. Did the Fullones ever strike, formally? Records are vague. There's no clear headline saying Raumis Laundry Folok Euproar. But the murmurs are there, in graffiti, in letters, in the uneven quality of togas returned to senators. Some historians think the rebellion began, not with a march, but with a shrug and a skipped rinse cycle. Back on your imaginary feet, you feel a strange sense of respect. These people scrubbed the empire clean, one stomp at a time, and while emperors bathed in marble tubs, it was Fullones who wrung out their dignity in hot, stinking basins. The Follonica closes its doors for the night. Workers disperse, some limping, some joking. You catch Livia smuggling home a scrap of dyed cloth, probably to patch her tunic. She winks at you. Perks of the job, she says, and vanishes into the dusk. You linger, the smell still clinging to your nose, the stomp still echoing in your legs. This was just one day in the basin. Tomorrow, you might just come back. Not because it's pleasant, but because something down here is starting to bubble. You return to the Follonica on what feels like just another ordinary Roman morning. The sky is pale with dawn, the paving stones still cool underfoot, but as you pass under the archway and into the bustling workyard, something has shifted. It's subtle. A few hushed conversations, a couple of heads turning when you enter, then snapping back too quickly. The vats are still frothing. The paddles are still smacking damp cloth, but there's an odd stillness in the eyes of the workers. A little too much awareness. Today, your focus drifts away from the vats and the sweat. You're curious about the people behind the Follonica, the quiet empire within the empire, the guild, the laundromat mafia, the collegium fullinum, as you've come to understand, isn't just a team of coworkers. It's an institution. You head toward the back of the workshop, where the foreman's quarters sit. In a cramped room stacked with wax tablets, tokens, and oddly ceremonial robes, you find the brain of the operation. The guild operates like an ancient version of corporate HR, city council, and religious committee all wrapped into one. The guild has bylaws. It elects leaders, enforces fines, and even organizes public events. And yes, they have uniforms. Robes embroidered with symbols like laurel leaves and paddle crosses. You try one on. It's less intimidating when it smells like mildew. Today is meeting day. You're ushered into a shaded atrium where the guild elders are gathering. There's Lucius, whose eyebrows are longer than his mustache. There's Petronia, sharp-eyed, and always scribbling. And of course, the current magister, or guild master, a man named Varro, whose voice is so gravelly it could start a landslide. They're reviewing membership dues, approving a new supplier for chalk paste, and debating disciplinary action for a full-loan who skipped guild duties to run an illegal side, hustle bleaching bedsheets for a brothel. Naughty, but clever. Historians still argue whether these guilds functioned independently or were tightly monitored by Rome's elite. Some evidence suggests a degree of autonomy, especially in provincial cities. Others insist they were puppets, tolerated for their usefulness but never truly respected. You suspect it's both? One guild ledger reveals something strange, a pattern of late dues from a dozen workers over several months. Economic hardship, says Lucius. But Petronia frowns. Or protest? She murmurs. You raise an eyebrow. She doesn't elaborate. Outside, the workers continue their toil. But behind the scenes, the guild is consolidating power. They control who works, who rises, and who scrubs until their fingers go raw. It's not just about fabric anymore. It's politics. And here's a quirky little slice of that power fullers were known to bless their tools. During certain festivals, they'd anoint their paddles with oil, decorate them with garlands, and parade through the streets. It was part spectacle, part superstition. After all, you want the spirits on your side. When your scrubbing senator, sweat out of wool, you return to the main floor and strike up a conversation with a younger fellow named Marinus. He speaks in half, whispers, constantly glancing around. The guild takes care of you, until it doesn't, he says. If you fall behind, they fine you. If you miss a vote, they dock your chalk. And if you question the dues, he mimes a slashing motion across his throat, then laughs. Probably joking. Hopefully. You wonder aloud if anyone's ever tried to break from the guild. Marinus shrugs. Some tried. Didn't end well. One opened his own shop with Syrian techniques. Very fancy. The guild cut off his suppliers. Now he runs a fish stall, so yes, maybe mafia is the right word after all. As the day winds on, you begin to see the guild's fingerprints everywhere. The best tools go to favored members. The freshest urine, the high ammonia stuff is reserved for those who pay extra. And promotions. Let's just say being friends with Varro the Gravel, voiced magister, doesn't hurt. In one corner, you find a storage room with what looks like ceremonial scrolls. Among them, a list of honored full-loans who achieved guild fame. It's like a hall of fame for laundromats. One entry stands out: Flavia Minor, who reportedly restored the blood-stained toga of a gladiator. So, well, it was reused for a senator's speech. Economical. And mildly horrifying. But even within this tight-knit, tradition-bound system, there are cracks forming. You overhear two workers grumbling about a new clay shipment being thinned down to stretch costs. Another complains that the guild took their holiday pay and redistributed it for a statue fund. Not a statue of a god, mind you, a statue of Varro, with paddle. These small irritations fester in the corners of conversation. You see it in the way workers glance up when a guild officer walks by. Not with respect, with calculation. Back in the atrium, a heated discussion breaks out. A proposal is made to raise dues by a single sestertius per week. It doesn't sound like much, until you realize that's half a day's food for a family. A vote is called. The elders agree 7-2. The motion passes. Varro gives a nod that says, "Discussion over," and the room disperses. But outside, word spreads fast. And as whispers float through the steam and suds, you can feel it brewing. The irritation, the quiet outrage of a worker who knows they're being squeezed dry, just like the cloth under their calloused hands. You pause near the vat, watching a full-on stump without rhythm, lost in thought. This isn't just a laundry shop, it's a pressure cooker. And when it finally bursts, the guild won't be ready. The next morning hits you like a wall of damp wool. You shuffle into the Phalonica, eyes still adjusting, and realize something smells different. Less like pee, more like charred citrus. Turns out one of the Phalones tried a new blend of cleaning agent involving orange peel and sulfur fumes. You make a note, interesting experiment, less than relaxing aroma. Today, you've decided to get philosophical about filth. As you dodge a splash from a rinsing basin, you begin to wonder, how clean did Romans really expect to be? Were spotless tunics the goal, or just a polite suggestion? You start to notice something that had slipped past before. Not every toga is truly white. Some are ivory, some off-white. A few are patched, others subtly stained in spots that probably tell stories you don't want to hear. You catch a tunic with a wine blotch, clearly scrubbed, but not fully removed, leaving a pinkish ghost on the linen. Someone had a good night, and that's the point. Roman hygiene was a spectrum, not a commandment. This was a world where bathing happened communally, often daily, but laundry less so. Garments were beaten, stomped, and fumigated, but not sterilized in any modern sense. You start to suspect that the whole obsession with clean was more about appearances than actual sanitation. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely believed in cleanliness for health or just for status. Some texts suggest moral purity was linked to physical appearance. Others imply it was all about social rank. If you could afford fresh, pale togas, you probably weren't scrubbing them yourself. And here's your quirky detail of the date in upper class Roman circles. A slightly yellowed toga was sometimes considered authentic, a sign of age and experience. Too bright, and people might assume you were new money. Or worse, trying too hard. Like that one guy at the party with gleaming shoes and a fake tan. Back at the vat, a Fulon named Rufus is carefully inspecting a set of senator's robes. These don't get the full treatment. He mutters, too much scrubbing and the fabric thins. Then they blame us. So he gives them a gentle soak, a light stump, and a perfumed rinse with rose water. You ask if all togas get this spa day. Rufus snorts. Only if they tip. Nearby, you spot a chalkboard with markings. Scores, maybe. Turns out it's a quality ledger. Each Fulon is tracked by output, complaints, and something called scent retention. You raise an eyebrow. Rufus shrugs. Some clients want their togas to keep a bit of body aroma. Makes it feel personal. You try not to retch. You spend some time in the back storeroom, where rare additives are kept. Saffron, vinegar, lime powder, a small pot of sea salt from Alexandria. These are reserved for elite clients, usually senators, magistrates, or visiting dignitaries. It's like a dry cleaner's VP lounge. One shelf holds a stack of thin leather tokens, special order tags. Then, tucked behind a curtain, you find something unexpected, a bundle of rejected garments. Torn, discolored, or simply forgotten. Some have names stitched into them. One even has a tiny stitched frog, probably a child's tunic. You feel a strange pang. Every piece of fabric here carries a ghost. And ghosts, it turns out, can get political. In one corner, you overhear two workers complaining, not about the guild this time, but the clients. She said I ruined her hem. One scoffs. It was moldy when she dropped it off. The other shakes his head. He said the scent was off. Wants a refund. On scent. You realize the expectations are rising. Clients want not just clean, but perfection. Scented hems. Whiter than white fabric. Silk folded so precisely it stands on its own. All while the tools stay the same, and the guild continues to raise dues. The pressure is immense. And then there's the bleach. Rome's version of it, anyway. Mixtures of sulfur fumes and ash were used to brighten linens. Workers placed wet cloth in small, sealed rooms, then lit sulfur beneath to release fumes that would whiten the fabric. You've seen the setup, you've smelled the aftermath. And now, you learn of the risk if the room isn't ventilated quickly. The fumes linger. Workers have fainted. A few, according to whispered rumor, never woke up. No surprise then that some full-owns have started cutting corners. Less bleach, fewer rinses, shorter stumps, and when clients complain, blame the fabric, blame the weather, blame Mercury retrograde if needed, just not the full-owns, not directly. You watch a young worker slide a nearly clean tunic past the inspection slab. Her name is Silvana. She presses it smooth with a shell brush, sprinkles it with a bit of chalk, and folds it expertly. "It'll pass," she says. He never looks closely. You admire her skill and her calculation, because here's the real story. Roman laundry wasn't about purity. It was about performance. The illusion of cleanliness, the appearance of effort, and beneath that illusion, a quiet network of workers deciding how far they'll go to meet impossible expectations. As the day winds down, the full-owns hang up their tunics, some threadbare, others crisp. The vats are drained. The tools are scrubbed. But the tension doesn't wash away. It clings to the corners like mildew. You walk past a faded mosaic on your way out. It shows a man holding a laundry paddle like a sword, standing over a basket of wrinkled togas. The caption reads, "Cleanliness is power." You smile. A little ironic, considering what you've just seen, but it's also prophetic. By now, you know the Folonica's rhythm. The morning stomps, the midday grumbles, the occasional paddle duel over clay quality. But today, the mood has shifted. Again, it's not just the wary looks or the extra long coffee break with watery barley porridge. There's something specific lingering in the air. You round a corner and catch sight of a public notice nailed to the bakery wall across the street. A small crowd of full-owns is already gathered, squinting at the parchment. You squeeze in close. It's official. Emperor Vespasian has issued a new update on the vectigal urinae, the infamous urine tax. That's right. Rome, in all its glory, has figured out a way to monetize your bladder. It started as a practical nuisance. Now it's personal. The urine tax isn't new. Vespasian, that ever resourceful ruler, imposed it years ago to help refill the imperial treasury. He figured, correctly, that full-owns needed urine more than senators needed silk. And since pee flowed freely from Rome's population, why not tap it for gold? The collectors are clever. They don't tax individuals for using the public jars. They tax the full-owns, who buy the liquid afterward. A set fee based on volume. Smells like empire. Today's notice announces a small but potent change. The tax has doubled. You watch as the guild elders argue in whispered Latin. Varro the gravel-voiced magister reads the decree again, shaking his head. They don't understand. He mutters. They think we'll just pay more. They think we'll just soak it up. A few younger workers laugh, dryly. Soak it up. That's rich. Here's your fun fact: Vespasian's tax was so famous. Even centuries later, the French word for a public urinal, Vespasien, still nods to him. The man literally left his scent on history. Back in the Follonica, everything feels tenser. You see full-owns measuring urine with more precision, doling it out in smaller scoops. "Water it down," says one. "Client won't know." Someone else mutters, "He'll smell it for sure." Welcome to the new economy. Half the power, double the splash. Historians still argue whether the full-owns protested this tax openly. There are no records of marches or riots, but there are signs, hidden in graffiti, in declined guild attendance, in the unexplained spike in shoddy laundry returned to elite homes. One senator reportedly found his toga smelling faintly of vinegar and anchovies. "Sabotage," he whispered. You wander past a group of workers on break. They're sitting on overturned amphorae, nursing bruised heels and bruised egos. One suggests reusing spent liquid. Another proposes switching to vinegar entirely. A third just sighs and rubs their temples. The emperor taxes our waste, and we're supposed to thank him. She grumbles. You ask what would happen if they just refused to pay? Blank stares. Then, cautious glances. The guild would never allow it, says a full-own named Tiberius. They'd blacklist us before the prefects got involved. Yet, later that day you catch Tiberius whispering to a supplier, arranging an off-the-books barrel trade. It's not rebellion. Not yet, but it smells like one. And here's a quirky detail. Some Phallonica began experimenting with animal urine to dodge the tax. Goat pee, specifically. Higher ammonia. Less volume. More confusion for tax agents. No one's tested goat pee ratios, one worker says. Could work. Might melt the linen. We'll see. The ripple effects are immediate. Prices go up. Clients grumble. Some demand refunds. Others switch laundries. A few even threaten to wash at home, though none of them follow through, because nothing says crisis, like a Roman noble realizing they must touch their own tunic. Back in the drying courtyard, you find Silvana carefully folding tunics. They're squeezing us, she says, top to bottom. They tax the stink, and we're supposed to smile. Her hands are cracked. She tucks one tunic into a satchel marked for delivery, then leans close. What if we just stopped? It's not said with fire, more like a flicker. But it's the first time anyone has voiced it aloud. The rest of the day drips by like a slow leak. The vats still bubble. The paddles still swing. But now you see every stump and stir with fresh eyes. Every splash carries a cost. Every rinse drains more than water. And through it all, Emperor Vespasian remains comfortably distant, tucked in his palace, likely wrapped in a robe washed by a man now earning half a wage for twice the effort. It's enough to make you want to dump a vat outside the forum. As you leave, you notice a new symbol scratched onto the wall by the alley. A crude drawing of a paddle broken in two. It wasn't there yesterday. Someone's getting bold. You wake to a sky smeared in early gray. The street's quieter than usual. As you slip through the usual alleyway toward the Phallonica, something immediately feels off. The stink is still there, of course, ripe and familiar, but the voices are hushed. The stomp rhythm has slowed, the clatter of paddles against tile, echoing in irregular patterns. It's as if the shop itself is limping. Today, you're going to feel the toll. The hidden cost of this ancient profession that no statue, no triumphant mosaic ever bothered to show. You crouch beside Silvana at the rinsing basin. Her sleeves are rolled up to the shoulder, revealing arms mottled with raw patches and tiny scabs. Burns, she says flatly, noticing your glance from the bleach fumes. It happens. She dips her hands into the water anyway, like pain is just another tool of the trade. A few feet away, Marinus is limping slightly as he hauls a basket of damp linens. You ask if he's all right. He pulls off his sandal and shows you a raw blister the size of a fig. It'll pop by lunch. He shrugs, hobbling off. Historians often skip this part, the day-to-day injuries, the long-term damage. But for Phallones, pain was just part of the uniform. Let's tally it. Constant contact with ammonia led to skin rashes and, likely, chemical burns. Stomping barefoot on uneven stone caused calluses, splinters, and broken toes. Bleach fumes inflamed lungs. And bending over vats day after day? Hello, herniated discs. And here's the quirky part. Some Phallones believed in protective charms against injury. You spot one such amulet dangling from a worker's belt, a small bronze frog carved with a Latin inscription. Lucky Scrubber. It reads. Adorable. Morbidly optimistic. You step into the steam room where garments are hung for bleaching. The sulfur fumes are thick today, and you can barely keep your eyes open. Inside, two Phallones move like ghosts, covering their mouths with rags. You ask why they don't rotate out more often. No one wants this shift, says one. But the guild pays extra. I've got kids. There's no proper ventilation. Just a tiny hole in the ceiling and the hope that you don't breathe too deeply. One worker coughs violently, then stumbles out, blinking and wheezing. Fine, He gasps. Just tired. He collapses onto a bench, hands shaking. Outside, the courtyard buzzes with the quieter energy of overwork. The paddling station has slowed. Workers move stiffly, barely lifting their arms. You watch one older Falone, Gala, hold her shoulder after each fold. Old wound, she says. Too many years twisting fabric. She pauses, then adds, but if I stop, someone else gets my hours. And here's where the system shows its teeth. The guild, for all its rituals and feasts, doesn't offer real support for injured members. No sick days. No compensation. You get hurt, you limp through it. Or you don't eat. There's an unspoken hierarchy here. The strongest get the best shifts, the least noxious tasks. The rest shuffle toward the bleach pits, praying the fumes won't take their voice by sunset. You find Petronia, one of the guild scribes, near the ledger room. You ask if the guild tracks health issues. She chuckles darkly. We track output. What a member does. Not what they lose doing it. She taps a scroll. Silvana folded 7 garments yesterday. That's what matters. You begin to understand why, behind all the jokes and paddle ceremonies, a different kind of resistance is taking root. Not a loud one. Not yet. But subtle, daily refusals, half, clean tunics, missed bleach sessions, folded hems with just a bit too much wrinkle. Historians still argue whether this laundry fatigue was accidental or intentional, but records show a noticeable dip in Follonica productivity right after Vespasian's tax. Coincidence? Or quiet sabotage? One wall near the drainage trench is covered in graffiti, mostly names, jokes, anatomical doodles. But tucked between 2 scribbled fish is a line you haven't seen before. Even suds wear away stone. You look around. No one's watching. You scratch a quiet mark next to it. Just a dot. By mid-afternoon, the workshop's noise has dulled. Rufus leans against a pillar, rubbing his wrist with a cloth soaked in vinegar. It's the joints, he says. They seize up. You ask if he's thought of retiring. He snorts. Retire with what? Dignity? Outside, the amphorae gurgle with fresh deliveries. A young runner jogs up with a new tax invoice. Another increase. 3rd in 2 seasons. Something breaks. Silvana tosses a tunic across the slab, not folded. Rufus lets a paddle drop. It hits the tile with a loud crack. No one scolds them. No one moves. You glance at the pile of garments awaiting final inspection. Normally, it would be half gone by now. Today, it's barely touched. A quiet standoff. No fists, no chance. Just absence. Hesitation. The day ends slower than usual. The vats drain with less gusto. The lauter has dried up. As you leave, you notice more marks carved into the alley wall. One looks like a cracked urn. Another, just 3 dots in a row. Pain, left untreated, becomes more than pain. It becomes anger. It becomes memory. And in this shop of suds and silence, memory is starting to ferment. This morning, the air in the Follonica crackles not with noise, but with quiet purpose. There's an edge to it, a shared knowing behind the glances. You've been here long enough to sense it, like the pause in conversation before someone drops a truth bomb. Something's brewing. And oddly enough, it's on the walls. You slide into your usual corner spot beside the basin, but your eyes keep drifting to the crumbling plaster near the rear exit. At first glance, it's just old graffiti. Latin scrawls, faded sketches of tunics and feet. But look closer. There's a new message etched into the lime wash, written with a sharp tool rather than charcoal. The bleach eats more than fabric. You start spotting them everywhere. Tiny phrases scratched between old names and doodles. One says, stomp quietly, but stomp together. Another, better to wrinkle a toga than a soul. You're witnessing a kind of passive manifesto, etched in secrecy, in soapstone margins. Graffiti in Rome wasn't just rebellious. It was a kind of informal newspaper. A worker's whisper. A customer's jab. A lover's curse. And here, in the humid belly of the Follonica, it becomes a code. A signal. You wander the workroom, pretending to inspect paddleware. Near the folding bench, another message. 3 paddles, 1 fold tut slow day. A joke. or instructions. You ask Silvana about it. She shrugs too casually. People get bored. People get clever. But later, you catch her adding a little swirl to the end of a word on the back wall. It's not random. You spot a few senior Falones hovering near the cisterns, speaking in low tones. Petronia strolls past with her wax tablet, eyes flicking to each wall scribble. She doesn't stop them. She doesn't clean them. She records nothing. Historians still argue whether the graffiti from Falonica was personal expression or proto-Union language. Some believe it was harmless worker banter. Others think it was the first written record of labor dissent in Roman industry. Either way, you're standing in the middle of a low, tech social network made from lime and grumbling. You pause near a drainage trench where someone's carved an image of a man slipping on soap. Beneath it, even the gods fall sometimes. The gods. Or maybe the bosses. Quirky tidbit time. Archaeologists once found graffiti in Pompey's Falonica district that read, "I cleaned the toga of a liar. May Jupiter smudge his sleeves forever." Petty. Absolutely. But it tells you just how personal laundry could be. Everyone wore clothes. Everyone had skin in the game. Back inside, Marinus shows you a small palm-sized paddle carved from olive wood. "It's just for jokes," he says. I tap it 3 times when the guildmaster passes. You ask if that's a protest. He grins. Depends who hears it. The graffiti is only part of it. You notice subtle changes in behavior too. One worker rinses twice as slowly. Another folds tunics too tightly, causing creases that won't shake out. A pair of Falones switch name tokens, confusing the quality records. These aren't accidents. They're signals. You catch Rufus muttering at the rinse vat. Stain the hem, not the heart. It makes no sense at first, until you realize he's quoting one of the graffiti lines from the courtyard wall. It's spreading. Graffiti becomes graffiti plus gestures. Gestures become habits. Habits become culture. The Falonica is becoming something else. A pressure cooker with chalk, smeared sides, and quietly rebellious steam. You ask Petronia if she's noticed. She simply raises one eyebrow and says, "The walls always talk. You just have to listen." One corner of the room holds a message that looks older than the rest. It's scratched deep, as if made in anger. "We clean their lies and wear their pain." The letters are crude, like they were carved with a nail or a shard of tile. You stare at it for a long moment. You start seeing layers. Old graffiti painted over by new slogans. Messages erased with chalk, then rewritten hours later. Someone is tending to this wall like a garden. A pattern emerges, 3 dots. A crooked paddle. A tunic hanging upside down. These are symbols, shorthand for ideas no one dares speak aloud. Meeting tonight? Someone whispers as they pass, tapping 3 fingers against their wrist. And this is the part history forgot, that the first rebellions often aren't shouted. They're etched. Whispered. Folded into daily tasks. Drawn behind baskets of chalk jars where the guild can't see. By the end of the day, the Falones are smiling a little more. The paddles still slap, the vats still steam. But beneath the surface, a current runs. As you walk home, you pass a public wall not far from the bathhouse. There, beside some crude art and a very tired pun about figs, is a fresh mark, a broken paddle, drawn with careful lines. It's the first one outside the Falonica. By now, you've got your routine. Slip in early. Watch the vats fill. Spot the new graffiti. Guess who's limping today and who's pretending they aren't? But this morning something's different, again. The stomp rhythm is gone. Not slower. Gone. You step inside and stop cold. The basins are full. Garments are soaking, but no one's moving. A room full of Falones stand by the vats, arms crossed or hands idle. The air hums with it. A silent tension, like a held breath. This isn't laziness. This is refusal. It doesn't last long. After a few minutes, a paddle claps the basin. Work resumes, slowly, but you caught it. So did others. That was a whisper of protest. You catch Silvana later at the rinse station. Was that planned? She shakes her head, too quickly. No. Just slow to start, long night. Then she smirks. Coincidences happen. Sure they do. The Falones are finding ways to say enough without ever saying it out loud. It's subtly staining one edge of a hem to signal a boycott. Folding tunics inside out, an insult if delivered to the wrong client. Deliberately mixing up chalk types, giving elite clients rougher finishes than expected. They're playing a quiet game of pushback. Historians still argue whether these acts were spontaneous or coordinated. Some say Rome's working class was too fragmented to organize like this. Others point to patterns. Similar symbols across cities, a synchronized dip in quality reports, whispers of the silent ones in merchant letters. You're starting to lean toward the second group. Today, you find a new message on the wall by the bleach room. Don't stump for those who spit. It's carved with care, letters neat and even. Nearby, someone's drawn a sandal with wings, maybe a joke about quitting or just wishing. At the folding station, Rufus hands you a tunic with a smile. Spot the mistake, he says. You squint. Everything looks fine until you turn it inside out and see the hemline embroidered with a single word, Piger. Lazy, the client's name, a notoriously stingy merchant. You raise an eyebrow. Rufus just grins and walks off. The Falones are done playing fair. And here's your quirky historical twist. Laundry mistakes could be serious. There's a known Roman case, though rare, of a launderer being beaten for returning a senator's robe too wrinkled for his speech. The workers knew the stakes. So these tiny acts of resistance, they're not just cheeky, they're brave. You walk the rows of steaming vats and notice more signs. Tunics rinsed with cold water instead of warm. Bleaching skipped altogether. Paddles laid neatly in rows, unused. Everyone's working, technically, but there's drag, resistance. Passive as a puddle, effective as a pothole. Even deliveries are slowing. A runner arrives, asks for the senator's urgent whites, and is told, politely, that they're not quite ready. Still soaking? Says Livia with a straight face. Want to check for yourself? The runner frowns, then leaves. No one corrects her. Back in the drying courtyard, you find a corner that's been quietly commandeered. A makeshift message board, scraps of cloth tacked to a wooden post. Each one carries a mark. 3 dots. A broken paddle. A curving line like a drain. This isn't graffiti. It's an invitation. Meeting tonight. Someone says softly as they pass you. Same place. You follow after shift. Down a narrow alley, through a gate that creaks like it's warning you to go home. Into an abandoned storeroom behind a bakery. It smells like yeast and dust. Inside 10 Falones, seated in a circle. No torches. Just a flickering oil lamp and the scent of damp wool. Pharaoh is not here. Petronia is. She's speaking softly, outlining small changes, staggered delays, coordinated mistakes. A plan to reroute clean water for extra soaking time. We don't stop working, she says. We'll slow the city down one wrinkle at a time. It's not a strike. It's not a riot. It's a slump, a drift. A resistance so slow it can't be punished. Someone asks what the goal is. Petronia looks around. A new vote on the dues. Access to the better clay. Fair shift rotations. And no more penalties for speaking up. She pauses. And maybe they'll remember who keeps their robes from reeking. You leave the meeting in a daze. This isn't some idealistic march with banners. It's guerrilla laundry warfare. Clean shirts as sabotage. Deliberate wrinkles as coded language. A basin-based uprising. You pass by the Falonica one last time before bed. The door is closed, but someone scratched a fresh message into the lintel. The water is still, but we are not. You believe them. The sun rises over Rome like a cracked egg, spilling yellow over the stone streets and steaming roof tiles. You approach the Falonica expecting the usual rhythm. Buckets sloshing, paddles cracking, someone muttering about the quality of last night's wine. But today, you're greeted with something much stranger. A voice. Loud. Clear. In the forum. You recognize it. You weave through the alley, heart beating a little too quickly. And there, standing atop a modest platform in the shadow of a bread stall, is Rufus. Yes, that Rufus. Laundry paddle legend. Crusty knees. Secret tunic insulter. Holding a sponge in one hand like it's a scepter. He's not yelling. He's speaking. Measured. Paced. A bit hoarse, but undeniably deliberate. They want the white to shine. He says, but they don't care what it costs us to scrub it. People stop. Turn. It's mostly common folk, vendors, porters, slaves on errands. But a few togas in better condition are starting to edge closer, too. Curiosity has a scent. And today, it smells like sulfur and defiance. They tax the pee we stand in. Rufus continues, gesturing to his worn sandals. They ration the clay that saves our skin. They fine us when our backs break. The sponge flops slightly as he lifts it. This, he says, this is Rome's crown. Laughter ripples through the crowd. Historians still argue whether this speech actually happened. Some claim it's apocryphal, a myth passed down by workers to inspire grit. Others point to a brief line in a senator's journal about a laundryman's indecent noise making in the forum. Whatever the case, you're here now, and it's very real. Rufus pauses. Someone throws a small coin at his feet. Encouragement, or payment for entertainment. He bows theatrically. Then, with a wink, he steps down and vanishes into the crowd before the prefects arrive. Back at the Phalonica, the atmosphere has shifted from murmured protest to cautious electricity. Everyone's talking. Did you hear? He said it. In the forum, Petronia is unamused. Idiot, she mutters, but she doesn't erase the new graffiti someone's scratched onto the rinse basin. Clean speech is still speech. The rebellion's voice has found air. Silvana starts crafting verses in soap. She writes on a sheet before folding it. If they wrinkle our rights, we'll wrinkle their robes. It's silly. Poetic. Dangerous. Soon, you hear other voices rising. Marinus mimics a senator's drawl while tossing tunics. Ah yes, and do try not to sweat into my dignity. Laughter erupts. Not forced. Real. Loud enough to draw looks from passers-by. One younger Fulon, emboldened, sings a mocking chant during folding duty. O noble hem, O mighty crease, bring Rome's backside modest peace. It becomes a trend. These little soapbox moments. Fulon speaking not just to each other, but outward. To the city that's used to ignoring their labor. You wander the dye room and overhear a conversation that makes your skin prickle. Two clients complaining. Not about stains, but about attitude. They're too bold lately, one says. Act like they own the water. The other mutters, maybe it's time to hire Greeks again. That threat hangs heavy. Replaceability. Outsourcing. Importing foreign labor, slaves, or low-paid workers from provinces, has long been the patrician's weapon against domestic unrest. The guild elders know it. Varro calls an emergency meeting, and you sneak close enough to catch snatches of it. Control the speech, he grunts. Rein it in. No more forum nonsense. Petronia doesn't object. But she doesn't agree either. That night, another message appears near the alley entrance. A toga speaks less clearly than a barefoot shout. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some laundries began tucking little cloth scraps with messages into garment folds. Mini manifestos, often in crude verse. Some clients caught on. One merchant returned a tunic with the note still inside, furious. Another reportedly left a coin in response. The city is noticing. The rebellion isn't just in slow stomps and skipped bleach sessions anymore. It's finding tone. Volume. Irony. Rome, for all its grandeur, has a weakness. It hates embarrassment. And nothing's more embarrassing than being outwitted by someone elbow, deep in your undergarments. Rufus becomes a legend. Not a hero. He's too grumpy for that. But a symbol. They start calling him Sponge Tongue. There's even a sketch of him, caricatured on a wall, big ears, huge paddle, tiny laurel crown made of socks. Rome loves satire. And the Fulons have finally joined the joke. You wake up to rumors, whispers drifting from baker to barber, like ash caught on a summer breeze. Something strange is happening in the city. people are noticing. Not the speeches, not the paddles, the clothes. You arrive at the Phalonica to find Silvana humming. Not a chant. Not one of her usual sarcastic jingles, just a tune, light and off-key. She's ironing a tunic, not her usual task. And for a moment, you don't realize why it's worth watching. Then it hits you. That tunic is spotless, pristine, bleached, brushed, perfectly folded. But it isn't meant for a senator. It belongs to a butcher's son. You saw the name scratched on the delivery tag yesterday. This isn't a client with power. It's someone ordinary. And their tunic gleams like imperial silk. You look around and realize it's not a fluke. Others are doing it too, turning out garments that practically glow for clients who've never tipped more than a handful of nuts. Working class tunics, commoner chaitans, even a stable hand's cloak, each one folded like a temple offering. It's a silent signal, and it's spreading. Historians still argue whether this phase was organized or spontaneous. But this much is clear. The clean shirt campaign became a visual protest that no law could punish. A perfect tunic can't be arrested. A well-folded hem doesn't shout in the forum. But in a city obsessed with presentation, these spotless garments carry meaning. You ask Petronia about it. She just smiles and says, "Sometimes the cloth says what the mouth can't. Here's a quirky twist. Romans believed clothing held moral power. A clean toga reflected inner virtue. Some temples wouldn't even admit worshippers in visibly dirty robes. So now, when ordinary citizens show up gleaming, the elite get confused. Who's holy? Who's humble? Who's playing a joke? Even better, clients begin copying the style. They ask for the extra rinse, or whatever you did to that fishmonger's cloak. The irony drips thicker than amphorae of donkey milk. You find Rufus inspecting a delivery pile, tongue half out in concentration. We're not just laundering cloth anymore. He mutters. We're laundering status. He grins. And we decide who shines. In one corner, Livia crafts a new fold, an elegant twist that causes the tunic's collar to bloom slightly, like a flower. It catches light in just the right way. She calls it the wrinkle of truth. Marinus adds it to a magistrate's tunic. He won't notice, but the baker will. Even the graffiti plays along. New messages appear. Dirt belongs to those who deserve it. And every stain ignored is a message missed. The guild is flustered. Varro issues a quiet warning. No deviation from client tier protocols. It's met with nods, then promptly ignored. One morning, a full-on shows up in a brilliantly clean tunic. Not a work one, but personal. When asked why, he shrugs. If they can shine, why can't I? You realize something subtle but powerful is unfolding. This isn't sabotage. It's sabotage's prettier, more devious cousin. Reversal. The full-ons aren't damaging clothes to rebel. They're elevating the wrong ones. Making beauty where the system expects dullness. Rewarding dignity where status denies it. A kind of laundering judo. You follow a delivery boy into the Sabura district. As he hands over a tunic, the client, a carpenter, unfolds it, sees the gleam, and freezes. This for me, he asks, suspicious? No mistake. The boy just grins. Word spreads. The clean ones, they start calling them. No leaders. No manifestos. Just a growing group of laundry workers using fabric as speech. And not everyone's happy. A senator's wife complains her cloak came back, lacking that imperial sharpness. A merchant asks why his garments aren't folded in the new style. When told, we're adjusting techniques, he fumes. Adjust elsewhere? But they don't, because now there's a waiting list for the clean treatment. No fee, no bribe. You can't buy it. You get chosen. And it's driving the elite mad. Even the street preachers catch on. One declares, the humble shall shine, and the proud shall fray. He's quoting laundry. The rebellion has entered theology. You spend one afternoon watching full-ons perform minor miracles, salvaging fabric most shops would burn, restoring color without dye, layering folds like armor. It's mesmerizing, and it's deliberate. This is the resistance made aesthetic. You catch Petronia smiling as she passes a glowing robe to a potter. They'll ask. She murmurs, "Why him? Why not me?" She shrugs. Let them wonder. You leave the Phalonica late that night, passing a delivery boy humming to himself. Slung over his shoulder is a wrapped tunic. On the parcel, in fresh charcoal, someone's drawn a tiny sunburst. You don't need words anymore. The cloth speaks just fine. At first, the absence doesn't register. The vats still glisten, the courtyard hums. The usual vinegar, sulfur tang clings to the air like an old joke. But then you start counting. 1, 2, 3 empty basins. No one at the bleached slabs. The folding table sits deserted. You ask Silvana where Marinus is. She shrugs without looking up. Didn't show? Gala. Out sick? Rufus. Took a day. But the real answer flickers behind her eyes. You see it again in the way Livia avoids your gaze. It's not illness. It's not laziness. It's a withdrawal. The Fullones are walking. Not all at once, not with banners or a formal declaration, but basin by basin, shift by shift. A slow, silent exodus. At first, it's just the usual suspects. The louder ones, the creative folder, the part-time paddle poet. But then, over the next 2 days, the numbers shift. One delivery pile goes untouched. A bleach vat stays cool. The rinse basin gathers dust. You ask Petronia if she knows what's happening. She closes her ledger. People get tired, she says. It happens. Then she adds, quieter, sometimes. People get tired on purpose. Historians still argue whether this walkout was organized or spontaneous. No records of union meetings. No written demands. But there are gaps in the guild logs. Blank shifts, vanishing names. It looks, in hindsight, like a mutiny drawn in chalk. The clients notice first. Tunics come back late. Wrinkled. Or not at all. A patrician arrives, demanding his ceremonial toga. Silvana meets him at the door. "No one's here to finish it," she says. "You're welcome to scrub it yourself." He leaves without a word. You follow her to the back room, where she's mixing rinse water. "They thought we wouldn't dare," she says, staring into the basin. But the moment they felt the stink return, they panicked. Because, here's the thing, the patricians have no idea how to launder their own garments. They're not just unused to it, they're incapable. The empire runs on invisible labor, and when that labor steps aside, the grime shows. Literally. In one alley, you overhear 2 elite women whispering. "My husband tried to scrub his cloak. Ruined it. Mine wore the same tunic for 3 days. I had to burn it." There's panic. Not just among the rich, but the guild itself. Varro calls a meeting. Attendance is light. He huffs and stamps and waves the paddle scepter. "This is sedition." He growls, no one responds. The guild begins recruiting replacements. Foreigners, slaves, anyone willing to step into the vats. They offer bonuses, free chalk, extra oil rations. But the replacements don't know the secrets. They fold wrong, bleach too long, scrub too hard. The cloth frays. The clients complain louder. You find a message scrawled on the inner wall of the delivery gate. It's not just water that cleans. It's hands that care. And here's your quirky tidbit. The Romans believed certain laundries had blessed basins, places where garments came out softer, brighter, luckier. Turns out it was just good technique. And that technique has now walked out the door. You visit the bathhouse and hear the same story. A man boasting about his toga being cleaned 4 times, and still it smells of old goat. He doesn't laugh. He's genuinely distressed. Meanwhile, in the Subura district, you find Marinus sipping cheap wine on a rooftop. His feet are up, he's clean, but his hands are idle. "They noticed yet?" he asks. You nod. "Good," he says. "Let them sit in their own stink a while." The city doesn't collapse, but it wilts. Like laundry left too long in the rinse, markets grow louder with complaints. Fabric vendors grumble about refunds. Senators start sending servants door to door, offering coin for off. The book's laundering. Some Fullones take the offer. Most don't. The rebellion isn't about money, it's about pause. about absence, about stink. You return to the Phalonica on the third day of slowdown. It's quiet, fewer paddles, fewer jokes, but also fewer workers. Those who remain work slower, deliberately. Petronia for once looks rattled. We're losing contracts, she mutters. The guild can't hold without volume. She eyes you. They might cave. You ask if the guild will listen. She snorts. They might pretend. Outside, the air hangs heavy. People walk faster, nostrils flaring. Rome is used to many things. War, flood, scandal. But bad smells unforgivable. And this is how a rebellion wins, sometimes. Not with fire, but with funk. Not with fists, but with absence. At the alley wall, a new message appears. Even the emperor's robe smells if we don't rinse it. It's signed with 3 dots. You wake to the sound of drums. Not the ceremonial kind, not festive or musical. This beat is dull, persistent, like a warning bell muffled under layers of linen. You step into the alley and find something new. 2 officials stationed at the Phalonica entrance. They're not here for laundry. They're here for surveillance. The cleaners' conspiracy, they're calling it now. Not in public, of course. Too humiliating. But among guild officers and municipal scribes, it's whispered, Valones are banding together to sabotage Rome's image. To sabotage Rome itself. Inside, the workshop is quiet. Not empty, but still, too still. Paddles move mechanically. No singing. No folded jokes. No graffiti today. Someone's been cleaning the walls. You glance around and spot Petronia. No ledger in hand. Just a long stare at a drained basin. They're scrubbing more than tunics now, she says. They're scrubbing us. The crackdown begins subtly. The city posts, inspection envoys, to Philoniki across Rome, supposedly for hygiene audits. In truth, they're there to watch. Who's working, how long, and how well. Any slip is punished. Missed folds. Late deliveries. Mild scent discrepancies. One worker gets fined for excess wrinkling. Historians still argue whether these inspections were sanctioned by the emperor or initiated by paranoid merchants. Either way, the response is coordinated and ruthless. You find Silvana kneeling by the dye jars, barely moving. They came to my home, she whispers. Asked about a tunic I folded last week. Said it smelled like salt instead of chalk. Her hands tremble. They threaten my brother. A new rule appears overnight: all tunics must be inspected by guild officials before delivery. It's pitched as quality control. Everyone knows it's censorship. Rufus doesn't show up at all. Neither does Marinus. The guild begins importing new workers. Gaulish slaves, Egyptian laborers, a few terrified apprentices. They're rushed in, barely trained, assigned to bleach and fold under watchful eyes. Their work is poor. Their hands bleed. The vats reek of sulfur and desperation. You sneak into the storeroom and find Petronia writing. Not on parchment, but fabric scraps. She tucks them into satchels bound for other Phalonica. Some still listen, she says. Not everyone bends. One of the new workers tries to speak with Silvana, a young Gaul, maybe 15. She listens, nods, then teaches him how to fold the clean crease. But not the right way. A decoy. Protection. You realize even sabotage has its layers. Here's your quirky detail: Roman law technically forbade political assembly among working classes, but religious feasts were exempt. So now, Valones start praying more often. Groups meet in alley shrines, burn herbs, and whisper beneath the statue of Minerva, not for wisdom, but for strength. The mood tightens like a waterlogged rope. Valones begin speaking in code again. A folded collar means yes. A left-facing hem means lie. You see it in motion, pass between basins, woven into tunics. Even graffiti returns, faintly, in soap smudges, in dye drips. One message appears on the rinsing table: bleach hides nothing forever. But the guild is panicking. Varro issues mandates. Anyone caught skipping shifts will forfeit wages. Anyone caught writing slogans is expelled. A new roster appears, randomized daily, impossible to track. You find Livia crying by the clay store. They made me scrub my own cousin's tunic, she says. Didn't even know it until I saw the patch. He was arrested last week. Said he laughed at a toga joke. Outside, the prefects make public examples. One Falone, anonymous, has their name scratched from the wall of guild records. A symbolic execution. Others are warned. You'll work, or you'll rot. The silence now isn't protest, it's survival. But the stain doesn't rinse. You pass a tunic left hanging in the alley. No tag. No claim. Folded perfectly. Bleached bright. A message without a messenger. And then, one night, a basin catches fire. It's small. Contained. No one hurt. But it wasn't an accident. Someone tossed a sulfur jar into the coals. The room flared with yellow smoke. And the words carved above the basin, once washed away, reappear beneath the suit. You can't clean a cracked vat. No one claims it. The guild calls it vandalism. The Falones say nothing. You leave the Falonica with the sting of ash in your lungs. Behind you, the new workers scrub in silence. The veterans disappear one by one. And in their place, the vats bubble emptily. Rome thinks the rebellion has ended, that a few fines and threats have bleached the problem away. But you know better. The stains are deeper now, harder to rinse, and they've just started to set. The rain arrives at dawn, not a downpour, just a steady, grim drizzle that glazes the cobblestones and muffles footsteps. You shuffle through the mist toward the Falonica, half expecting to find it empty. But it's open, vats full tables set. Almost normal, too normal inside. The Falones are working quietly, precisely, no jokes, no graffiti, no whispers. Just the sound of cloth on stone, the squelch of rinsed water, the occasional creak of a worn sandal. The rebellion, it seems, has gone quiet. Petronia is at her station, inspecting tunics with cold efficiency. Silvana moves like a ghost, hair tucked, eyes low. A few of the younger ones aren't here. You don't ask why. You already know. The cleaners' conspiracy has been scrubbed out, at least officially. The guild, under pressure from city officials and merchant complaints, has reasserted control. Varro, surprisingly silent during the chaos, has returned with what he calls restabilization protocols, new pay scales, stricter inspections, a suspiciously generous supply of high-grade chalk. You know that kind of generosity. It's hush money. And here's where the history gets murky. Scholars debate what happened next, whether the rebellion simply fizzled, or if it was crushed in one final, quiet purge. The records grow thin. But you're here now, walking among the rinsers and folders, and you feel the truth in your bones. They didn't win. But they weren't erased either, because as you inspect the shop more closely, the signs are still there. Subtle, tucked into seams, hidden in habits, a tunic folded with the clean crease, even when not required. A rinse sequence that adds unnecessary steps. Chalk measurements just slightly off. Intentional inefficiencies that blend perfectly into the appearance of productivity. This isn't surrender. It's camouflage. Silvana passes you a folded cloak. For the magistrate, she says blandly. But there's a glint in her eye, and when you turn the hem inside out, you see it. A tiny stitch, 3 knots spaced like dots. The rebellion hasn't ended. It's just quieter now, smothered in soap and silence. You learn of quiet meetings, not in storerooms, but during water, fetching trips, in shared bread lines, in the backs of temples. The resistance has adapted. No more speeches in the forum, no more graffiti bombs. Now it hides in technique, in style, in the refusal to forget. Quirky detail time. One Falonica began embedding rebellion folds into exported linens. Tiny, almost imperceptible creases that scholars now think were a code, a shared fingerprint of the protest. Some of these linens ended up in distant provinces, spreading the message like dye in water. Back at the Falonica, Rufus finally returns, limping, beard longer, expression unreadable. He doesn't go back to folding. He just walks the perimeter once, nods at Petronia, then sits in the corner with a paddle in his lap. Just watching, he says. The new workers remain. Some have learned the trade. Others are still trying to understand why their folded tunics keep being corrected. by senior staff with no explanation. They don't know about the hidden techniques. Not yet. You catch Petronia writing again. Not in a ledger, on a slip of cloth, a note, a record, a memory. She tucks it into the hem of a folded child's tunic. These garments outlive us, she murmurs. Might as well give them something to carry. The day ends like all others. Basins drained, vat scrubbed, walls washed. But just before closing, someone adds a smear of soap to the rinse table. 3 dots, a paddle, gun in moments, but not unseen. The guild pretends it's won. Officials stop visiting. The threats fade, the fines evaporate. But in truth, Rome just lost its appetite for a battle it didn't understand. Laundry workers don't riot. They fold. The city resumes its routines. Tunics brighten. The stink recedes. And the silent rebellion fades into legend. But the Fullones remember. And they don't forget the smell of silence or how to scrub beneath it. You return one last time. The alley's quieter now. The old amphorae have been replaced. Sleeker jars, less chipped, less likely to spill if a cat knocks them over. The walls of the Phallonica are cleaner too, re-plastered, retouched, but not blank, never blank. Inside, the vats still bubble, the rinse basins still gleam, but the air no longer holds that charged tension, that crackling spark of barely contained resistance. What remains is residue, not defeat, not victory, just something sedimented, like chalk dust in the corner of a basin. Silvana waves you in. She's supervising now. Not by guild appointment, of course. That role still belongs to some sweaty nephew of a merchant. But in truth, she runs things. Quietly. Completely. A delivery comes in. Tunics, cloaks, a ceremonial robe. Nothing special. And yet, every fold is precise. Every rinse carefully timed. There's a sense of craft here. A deliberate care that no bonus structure or guild edict could enforce. They don't check anymore. Silvana murmurs. Not since we started giving them exactly what they ask for. She doesn't wink. She doesn't need to. You notice the small signs. A tunic stitched with a hem 3 centimeters longer than regulation. A subtle nod to a retired Fallone who always preferred that style. A delivery tag folded into a triangle, not a square. The color codes reversed, then corrected, then reversed again. Even Petronia, now grayer, slower, still arrives daily. She no longer carries a ledger. She carries a thread box. You see her teaching a young worker how to stitch without tightening too much. A subtle technique for ensuring garments wear faster. Not in weeks. In years. A time bomb of fray. This is how legacy lives in quiet trades. Not in statues or speeches, but in practice, in the shape of a fold, in the pace of a scrub. Outside, a senator's servant waits impatiently. His master's cloak is a minute late. When he receives it, he doesn't notice the subtle creases. An ancient signal once meant for rebellion. He just grunts and leaves. But you notice. You always will. Historians still argue whether the Fullones truly rebelled or whether it was just a fluke. A flare of bad mood misread as a movement. But they're missing the point. The rebellion wasn't the noise. It was the silence. The mist stomp. The extra fold. The refusal to forget. You glance at the wall behind the folding bench. A new message appears, this one painted faintly in natural dye. Wrinkles fade. Threads remember. Rufus sits near the exit now. He doesn't work anymore. He watches. Sometimes he hums. Mostly he nods at workers who never knew the rebellion firsthand. But they still wrinkle the collars just so. They still rinse a little longer on quiet days. Because culture, once planted, grows in odd places. And resistance, once rinsed in, doesn't wash out. The vat's empty. The floors glisten. Another day ends. You linger as the last lanterns are extinguished. The Phallonica hums in the darkness, its stones warm with memory. You turn away, not because the story is over, but because it's finished for now. You walk the twilight alleys of Rome with quieter steps now. The sky has shifted from dusky gold to a soft, velvet blue. Fewer voices reach your ears. Just the rhythmic echo of your sandals and the occasional breeze fluttering across rooftop laundry lines. In the distance, the Phallonica sits silent. No more stomping. No more slogans. Just still water, cooling stones, and the gentle creak of wooden paddles resting against walls worn smooth by centuries of hands. You pause beneath a fig tree. Its leaves rustle like fabric. Somewhere nearby, a fountain gurgles. That same aqueduct-fed stream that once rinsed so many tunics now burbles in calm solitude. No rush. No stink. Just the hush of history settling into sleep. The rebellion didn't leave a monument. It left muscle memory. The kind that travels in fingers. In folds. In stories whispered behind vats and passed down through soap, worn aprons. A soft heritage, preserved not in books, but in the weight of a properly folded hem. You breathe deep. The air smells faintly of olive oil and cooled stone. Behind your eyes, the Fallones still move, tired, proud, unstoppable in their subtle defiance. And as you close them, you know no rebellion truly ends. It just changes uniforms.